Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's presentation. My name is Graham Goble. I'm the CEO and founder of BankBI, and thank you for joining us today. We've got a lot to cover today, and in particular, we're going to be talking about version 7 of the BankBI product and how through version 7 and other components, we feel we can start to look forward to introducing artificial intelligence into the world of finance. In the last couple of months, like many of us, I've been to a couple of conferences, and it would seem that pretty much every other presentation has got some form of artificial intelligence component. I guess with many of the AI companies heading for public offering, we are at probably one of the peaks of the hype cycle around artificial intelligence. So what I want to do today is try to bring some sort of sanity to the conversation, look at the foundational components we need to put in place to allow us to get the maximum value out of artificial intelligence, and in particular, look at what AI is good at and what it's not good at. So in particular, look at some of the do's and don'ts of using AI. So today's presentation is very much about how the BankBI product is moving forward. We have a brand new version called version 7. We've introduced recently things like planning and budgeting and customer and member profitability. And we think these are great foundational components that's going to lead us on the journey to enabling AI in a controlled way within the finance function. One of the, I guess, obvious truths about using AI is that unless we get our data in shape, adding AI into the mix is going to create more risk rather than clarity. We know as a regulated industry, whether you're a bank or a credit union, that the regulators are viewing AI like any other model, in the sense that the model needs to be explainable, it needs to be auditable, it needs to be documented. So there is a risk of using AI in what one might think of as a naive approach, rather than a controlled, well-defined approach with guardrails. And so what I want to do today is lay out how we might use AI in that more restricted way, if you like, but to ensure that we keep the guardrails around auditability and in terms of being able to explain and justify with clarity the results that we are using. So for a lot of organizations, banks and credit unions, there is still a lot of spreadsheet dependency. Hopefully with tools like BankBI, we can move you beyond that world of pulling data together into spreadsheets. And part of that journey is making sure that we've got a full single version of the financial truth. So I'll be touching on that as we go through today's presentation. So where we are probably all sitting right now is we're probably all very much in early experimentation mode. We maybe have an AI policy in the bank or credit union. We've started to give key staff members access to large language models. And increasingly, I think we're going to see competitive peer and board pressure to come up with a cohesive strategy as to how we can deploy AI within various roles and functions in banks and credit unions. What I want to particularly look at today is in the area of financial performance and analytics, how we can use AI in a controlled way within the finance team and department. So to do that, we really need to put in place what I've called architectural constraints or guardrails. What large language models are good at is predicting text and summarizing text. And what they're not good at is inferring financial data from raw data. So we want to avoid using the large language model to do ratio calculations or to roll up financial data. But what we do want to do is to ensure that we have a trusted source of that truth, the veracity of the data. And using that source of truth, we can then use the large language model for what it's good at, and that is interpretation, summarization, and interacting with us as finance professionals. So it is along those core architectural constraints that I'm going to take us today. And I'd like to outline to you all a sort of 4-step process that we can take to get us on this journey. As a backdrop to this, many of you are BankBI customers on this call today. And so many of you are on version 5 of our product, which has been around for a number of years now. And that journey has taken us forward in terms of 2 releases. So we have some of our mainly banks on version 6.1, and we have a new release that's coming out, which is version 7. And ultimately, we want to move all of our customers, whether you're a bank or a credit union, from version 5 and 6.1 on to version 7. So a little bit of the background as to how that journey has come about. We started version 5 with a Microsoft SQL Server database as the technology, and that required us to do what we call a generate results, which is take in financial data, loan and deposit data, run a compute process to generate results, and display that in a web application. The technology behind that web application is something called AngularJS for JavaScript. That is a Google framework that is an open source project that came out in the early noughties and was used as a way of building web applications, and is the way we built version 5 of the application. But increasingly, that pre-calculation of results was a problem for us, and we started to work with mainly banks initially with multi-company requirements, where you had a holding company, the bank, and maybe a subsidiary business. And so that led us down a path of having to build our own internal database technology called the query engine, and QE for short. Query engine takes us away from the pre-calculation, so no generate results. As soon as you load data, results are instantly available. It also allows us to dynamically calculate and roll up financials like balance sheets, income statements, but also ratios by branch or by company without having to pre-calculate those. It was still based on the same web application, AngularJS, but it did give us this multi-company situation. So all of our customers today, you're either on version 5 or you're on version 6.1. And very shortly, in a month or so, we're going to release version 7. And that is fully, again, query engine, so no generate results, but is moved from AngularJS to Angular. It might seem a small change in just 2 letters, but Angular is the more modern, more scalable framework from Google. Again, an open source project that is being contributed not just by Google development team, but also by engineers and developers around the world. And that is a more modern, as I say, user interface for building web applications. And again, it supports the multi-company scenario. So what I'm going to demonstrate to you today is that new user interface based on that query engine, which together gives us, as I say, more dynamic, more capable, more functionally rich web application that we will be migrating our customers to. So probably 2 important points to make here. The migration to version 7 is free to our customers. We're not charging anything for you to upgrade to that new version. You can also spin up that new version alongside your existing version. So whether you're on version 5 or 6.1, you will be able to spin up version 7 and look at that using exactly the same data that you are loading in the current version. So no big project, no big conversion project to worry about. You can move at your leisure to that new version, look at the new reports, inquiries, capabilities, and we think there's going to be a lot there that's going to really justify you moving on to and adopting that new solution. As I said, the nice thing about it is it's the same data you loaded into 5 and 6 that is being taken into 7, and that is already underway. So the migration here is really just a case of switching it on, training you on, showing you how to access the new reports, and then whatever fits in with your time frame and the projects that you have going on, you will be able to migrate at your leisure across to 7. So we will not be forcing a sunset of previous versions. We will be probably taking customers through that 6, 5, 6, 7 journey in the rest of this year and into next year, 2027. So free of charge, and as I say, capable to be spun up alongside the existing version. So what you will see in version 7 is a new user interface. Same principle. You can run this on the tablet, on your phone, on your desktop, but a brand new user interface with new functionality. So the presentation today is really going to focus on reminding you, if you like, on the value proposition of pulling that single version of the truth together and how the BankBI business has evolved in the last 13 years. I'm going to do a demo of version 7, so look at that new user interface. I talked about the new database. One of the features of version 7 as well is we have an API, an application programming interface to version 7, which means that other applications can make calls to our version 7 and retrieve data or retrieve HTML or web components that can be embedded in other applications. I'm going to touch on the customer profitability module. We have quite a number of our customers going through implementations of our system called Profit Analyzer. For many banks and credit unions, this is the first time they will have a consistent, continuous member and customer profitability solution based on FTP principles. So we think this is a really exciting opportunity to showcase that product. And we've had a great success with our planning, budgeting, and forecasting solution. We launched this back in 2025, took a number of banks and credit unions through their budget process at the tail end of last year, and are taking another wave of customers through a similar process this year. With that tool, it's a much more agile planning, budgeting solution, allows you to do everything from multi-year strategic plans to the next year's budget. And when in the new year, financial year, you can reforecast modeling interest rate changes, volume assumptions, expense changes, and so on. I will showcase a case study with one of the credit unions in the United States that went through that. That's on our website. And then finally, all paths lead to that AI component that I talked about. So hopefully, as we go through, we build up the story to get us to how we can use AI. As I mentioned, the do's and don'ts, what our roadmap at BankBI is, and what we see as some of the use cases of how we can integrate AI onto the BankBI stack. So just a reminder, BankBI does consist of these 4 components: financial performance, where we're bringing in general ledger; the banking performance, where we're bringing in loans and deposits from your core banking system; Profit Analyzer, where we're doing the FTP profitability; and planning and budgeting and forecasting, where we are doing the plans and the budgets. We very much run our projects to start and land in finance, but we are having great success then in helping push the analytics, especially around loan and deposit analytics and financial reporting around the other departments, branch, lending, risk, operations. And of course, the automation of things like board reports and ALCO reports give a great ROI case study for banks and credit unions implementing our solution. So I mentioned that there's a multi-step process to get to that sort of AI component, and it is a 4-stage process that I envisage. So step 1 is very much about consolidating all of the financial data into a single financial data model. And one of the challenges around this is that what we see in many banks and credit unions that have gone down the data warehouse route is oftentimes those data warehouses or reporting solutions are customer or member centric. They tend to be plugged into the core. They're pulling in loans, deposits, and checking from transactions from the core. They're providing what we might call a member customer operational view. And oftentimes that is only part of the solution that we need in finance. Obviously, in finance, balance sheet is king. Balance sheet is central to what you do, as well as pulling in those loan and deposits from the core. You'll also have syndications, increasingly more and more participations as banks and credit unions compete for originations. I think there's more and more evidence of more participations appearing on the balance sheet, maybe investments as well coming in as a portfolio. So the perception often outside of finance is that finance is somehow wedded to spreadsheets, but you just will not give up those spreadsheets. But the reality is, of course, that the spreadsheets are often the only place you can pull all of this data together to support, whether it's ALCO reporting or whether it's board reporting or whether it's call reporting for the regulators. It is the single place often. So the mission of BankBI is to pull all of this data together into a single data model to give you that single version of the financial truth. Yes, we need the operational loan deposit data from the core banking system, but in addition, we need to be able to pull in the participation, syndications, and other components. And the challenge is that often the data warehouse is serving a different use case, and that use case is really often about real-time access to data, in the form of things like OpenAI. So we want the latest balance, the real-time balance on accounts. We want to see everything real time. And so often these operational data warehouses or reporting systems, they update in real time and they advance daily. But in finance, we don't need real-time financial, or very rarely do we need real-time financial information. In the financial world, things update daily, interest accrues daily, and advances daily into profit periods. And then we pause at the profit period while we pull together this data, while we post any expenses or fees or income that we didn't know about on the last day of the month. And so there's this period of obviously closing out the financials for the month. And so BankBI is really geared to pulling that together, to supporting that financial version of the truth for finance. And so that's one of the key components that underlies our solution. And then based on that data, we have this user web application. Many of you obviously used to today's version 5 and version 6. And what we have, part of our strategy then is obviously to ensure that that data is modeled correctly, that every ratio is auditable, that we can run every ratio for every financial period. And ratios are not always the same. There can be subtle differences between banks and between credit unions. Some might include allowance for loan losses and looking at the loan portfolio. Some might look at rolling some loan fees into a yield on a loan portfolio. So there can be subtle differences in the way ratios are calculated. There are also multiple versions or flavors of ratio, depending on the context. So even one ratio like return on assets, we could be looking at monthly return, quarterly return, or yearly return. On the asset side, is it actual or average? On the average, is it monthly average, quarterly average, or yearly average? So there could be multiple use cases for averages based on different reporting requirements. And so within BankBI, we can compute all of those different use cases, roll those ratios up by branch, by company, by groups of branches into the financial reporting. So having a rich financial data model that's sitting on top of the single version of the financial truth is a really key component and value proposition of the BankBI solution. So just moving forward then, little video demo here of the new user interface at version 7. So it is a different user experience and user interface. And one of the things that we are able to do at version 7 is give users the ability to configure more of the application yourself. So whether you're configuring, whether for a particular branch, selecting particular dates, deciding, as I said, whether you're looking at actual or average balances. If you're looking at average balances, are you looking at quarterly, yearly, monthly average? And then similarly on the income statement, is it year to date? Is it month to date, quarter to date? So having full control in the reporting over those through filters, and then being able to actually select the KPIs and ratios you want to see in each of the reports. So from a rich list of pre-built ratios, you can simply drag those into your screen. You can move things around, you can rename sections, you can make them bold, make them italic, you can indent them. And so what this allows us to do is give you the control over what you want to see in your dashboards. Having built the dashboards, you can then have a choice of styles. So here we've got a chart view, and the chart has the ability to drill through to see the chart details in more detail. The red, green is where we're under or above budget. And the ability also to drill through to the actual ratio definition itself. So from clicking on a certain part of the chart, we can move through into the KPI tree. We'll come back to that a little bit later. But having selected our ratios for different purposes, we can also select different styles. And so we have, for example, this chart view with numbers underneath, but we have also a slightly thinned down version of that, which is the thumb chart view. So just the chart itself, and then multiple other views. So we can put the same ratios into multiple different views, whether it's charts with data, with the data underneath. So same ratios in the bottom section to the top, but just seeing it compared to budget, to last month, to last year, the ability to drill in, drill out of those and see those. So combination of chart and table in the same dashboard. And then other views as well that we can take a look at as well. So maybe we want to look at a year-to-date view So we're looking at same ratios, but now end of year to where we are in the demo here, which is end of February 26. So month to end of year view. So different styles, different views, and you can save these views to come back to later. So same dashboard can have multiple views depending on how you want to see the layout. So that's the ability to configure dashboards. Out of the box, we will configure dashboards around strategy and growth, around financial performance, around operational efficiency, and around risk and compliance. So maybe in a CAMELS format structure for risk and compliance. But having said, we will configure those during implementation time. You can override those configurations and build out the dashboards exactly as you need them. So that's a major improvement, if you like, on the dashboarding side. If we move into looking at sort of financial reporting, balance sheets, income statements, same sort of components or capability around filters here. So we have the ability to look at different report styles. So here we've got a daily, monthly change from year-end view. And we can see in the filters, we've got a number of capabilities. Again, multi-company, multi-branch. We can obviously drill down through the chart of accounts. Every report at version 7 goes all the way down to the bank or credit union's chart of account number. So your GL is inherent in every report now at version 7. And what you can also do is obviously select the comparisons. Starting date, we're looking at the end of February here. Select the branch if you wanted to make this branch specific. Go back in time, you can select from the calendar. There's some shortcuts to last month end, last year. And then again, on the reporting, we can either look at actual balances, or this is a balance sheet, so average balances. And therefore, is it the monthly average, the quarterly average, or the year-to-date average? So here we can look at year-to-date average and compare those within the report. Some reports also have the ability to show or hide certain columns to give you sort of report within a report. So we could hide the daily change here and just make this a monthly and a change from year end just by toggling off the show hide button here. So this gives us a lot of capability. Something new at version 7 as well is the ability to change what we call our report preferences. So firstly, we could change the scale. Do we want in actual numbers, thousands or millions? We could put a currency code like a $ in front of our amounts. We could put negatives into not just brackets, but make them red. We could change the formatting scale on our decimal places. So maybe we want to get down to the pennies or cents here, so we can go to 2 decimal places on the report. And then obviously the reports have filters, and we can show those filters either in the PDF output or in the report itself. So you can see the report has now moved. Negatives are in bracket and in red. We've got the $ in front of the amounts. We've got the 2 decimal places, and we've got the filters at the bottom of the screen. Now, let's supposing that we wanted to turn this just into a loan report. What we could do is filter the chart of accounts, select just the loan section, and now we've created just a loan report. We could obviously do a deposit report or anything else. And so again, we could hide the daily movement. And having built that loan report, we might then say, okay, we want to save that. And so we can save the report view and give that report view a name. And that report will now appear in our menu on the left-hand side. So we're starting to build up a predetermined, pre-calculated set of reports that we can come back to tomorrow, next week, next month, and we can run that report within the report group that we've established it. So a lot of capability here to build out reports, to filter those reports down. So if you think of things like building out an expense report by branch, a cash report showing daily cash balances, a loan or deposit report. So yes, you could have the full balance sheet, but you could also build out reports selecting, as I said, different rows to go into, or in this case, chart of account capability. So just moving on then, in addition to sort of balance sheet reporting, we've got, as we have in version 5 and 6, analysis of margin and growth, which we've rolled into something called product growth and pricing trends. And so one of these charts is looking at loan product trends. And so this is a little demonstration here of looking at, on the left-hand side, we have loan trend by balance. So here we see all of our different loan products and the relative balances on each of the months for the last 12 months. And over on the right-hand side, we're seeing the yield on each of those loan portfolio accounts. Underneath that, we're seeing the table view, which is the view of the data that's in the charts above, both balances and yield, and we can export all of this to Excel. Now that's quite a busy chart. You can hover over each product, and that will highlight in the chart the particular line. But what we could also do is maybe we want to create an analysis of our auto lending, and we've got direct and indirect auto lending. So just by toggling off those other business lines and doing the same on the yield side, we can restrict the chart now to just being our two auto loan products and the yield curve on those two loan products. So again, having selected this as an auto loan report by just clicking on those particular products, we can save the report, give it a name, call it our auto loan analysis. And now we have this report. We can come back and we can run this at any time without having to set it up all over again. And obviously, month by month, it's going to move forward, or day by day, it's going to move forward with the data. So hopefully some interesting and exciting capability there. Embedded in this new solution is a whole new charting capability. So we've enhanced the charting capability. It's going to allow us to deliver new styles of charts more quickly within the reporting application and give, as I say, more end user control over the configuration of reports and dashboards. Now, I mentioned one of the key things that we want to achieve on our journey to using AI is to ensure that we have consistent, auditable, documented results. I talked about return on assets. I talked about the different sort of variations you can have on actual numbers. So month to date, quarter to date, year to date, what's this month's figure, what's March's figure, what's year to date figure, and similarly on average as well. So we could have month to date revenue, quarter to date revenue, year to date revenue over actual balances. We could have month to date, quarter to date, year to date revenue over the month to date average, the quarter to date average, year to date average. So realistically, every ratio that has an income on an asset side component has possibly 6 possible outcomes that you could be wanting to report on. So what's important is to see those results and then be able to click on and examine those results in detail. So this is where the sort of large language models fail or can be very risky to use if you throw raw general ledger data at them and ask them to compute ratios. You don't really know what you're going to get, and there may not be consistency, or there certainly wouldn't be consistency between now and when you do it again the next time. So we don't believe that throwing this raw data at the large language model is the approach. We need to build this finance engine model that has taken the general ledger, the loans, deposits, and built all of the ratios into the analysis. So similar to version 5 and 6, we have a KPI tree which lets us drill through ratios. We can interrogate, in this case, return on assets. We can look at, as I said, looking at different capabilities, whether it's actual or average, monthly or whatever. We can change those very easily, look at the results, and then we can drill down, say, okay, what is driving this ratio? Are my assets up or down against budget? Can I drill into looking at different components and whether they're up or down? So again, the ability to move this into a full audit of ratios. And obviously, if you have return on assets, you've got all of your assets, you've got all of your income, whether it's interest, you've got all of your expense. So you've got a net income calculation going on. So if you're following down your net income, you're following your net interest income, and you're monitoring it against, as I say, looking at it through whether it's investment income or interest on loans. So again, you have full control to size, move around, to export, and to control this KPI tree. So this is what gives us the auditability, the documentation. It's also where you can validate the ratios that we're setting up within the BankBI system for our customers. So that's some of the kind of demonstration of the new features of version 7. I mentioned at the head of the presentation that we also have some API capability, and there's really two use cases that have come up in the last couple of years, both of which we are adding to version 7. So the first use case is where you may, in another application, want to embed some web component of BankBI. So let's suppose we want to take a chart on return on assets and we want to embed it in our other web application that the bank or the credit union has. And so you have this ability to make an API call to that component and pull it into and render it within your web application. So that's kind of the web API component. But each of these web components have data underneath. And so rather than using the visualization of the data, what you might be wanting to do is to actually pull the data through and then use your own visualization on the data. So this is very much the use case of making a data API connection. And so by formatting or the query to the BankBI system, and you would effectively be accessing the same query engine that our user interface is using. So firstly, we manage the authentication of the connection. We make available the same query engine for pulling the data. And remember, the data might be any of those variances that I talked about, whether it's month to date, quarter to date, year to date, but also we might be looking at 12 months data, 24 months data, 36 months data. So again, you can make flexible queries for any date or date range. You can aggregate data. You can do it by company, by branch. And we also support the drill down through the aggregation to the individual data records as well, as you saw in the KPI tree. So really using BankBI as a financial black box in a way. So as you approve and close your month-end financials, that could release through these API connections use of that financial data in other places. It's read-only. It's not going to change the data. It's really just an alternative to using the user interface to access and report on the data. So a couple of exciting ways that the BankBI solution at version 7 can become part of an enterprise solution in providing financial data to the rest of the enterprise. So we've covered step 1 in our journey to the AI function, getting that consolidated version of the truth. Step 2 was putting it into a consistent deterministic financial model, being able to use functionally richer user interface, better charting, more end user capability to configure reports and dashboards. The third piece is really how can we leverage that data, that financial data? We can create better board and ALCO reports. So that's one of the outcomes of version 7. We've got more out-of-the-box capability for ALCO reporting, board reporting. We can pull together not just data from within BankBI, we can consolidate other PDF reports that you might be needing to report in management reporting or board reporting. So BankBI can help orchestrate the assembly, if you like, of a bank of a board report. But the two other components that we've added in 2025 really help bring finance closer to the business, we believe. So our aim is to provide this customer member profitability solution, but also to provide this more agile planning and budgeting and forecasting solution. So a combination of this profitability, planning and budgeting, enriched, more richer board and ALCO reporting is really going to help drive more efficiencies, help finance and CFOs get closer to the business in answering key sort of what if scenario questions, whether that's around pricing or the effect of interest rate changes within the financial budget, or helping run a consistent member customer profitability solution, the results of which could be used in other parts of the bank or the credit union. So those profitability systems and budgeting systems are available. They're out have been implemented in many customers. On the profit analyzer side, what we are doing is bringing in every member or customer's account we're assigning an FTP rate for a cost of funds or a worth of funds. So whether it's an interest-bearing account or not, it could be an interest-free checking account, it still has a value. So on the cost of funds side, loans would typically be marked against the cost of funds rate. The difference between the contract rate and the cost of funds rate would be the net interest margin. On deposits, it's the other way around. So the deposit is notionally sold internally to a sort of treasury function and then resold, if you like, for lending. So the net interest margin on a deposit would be the difference between what you're paying for the deposits in terms of interest expense and effectively the yield you can achieve on using that money on lending. So in that way, we're able to assign a profit figure to every account, be it a liability or an asset. And then we're able to roll up non-interest income like fees and charges at the customer level. And we can also allocate costs back against to the customers as well. So this allows us to take your non-interest expense, allocate those to customers or members. That can be done through product weighting, so you can put a more weighted cost against certain products. If certain costs relate to credit cards or there's higher costs in servicing checking accounts, you can allocate a higher proportion of costs back against those particular products. So when you roll this up at an account level, you can get to a net profit figure. So the net interest margin plus the income and fees you've charged minus the costs gives us our profit figure. And then we can roll that up by customer, by product, by branch, by account manager, by age segment, by credit score range, industry, any criteria, whether it's at the customer level, the organization level, or the product level, that makes sense for you as a bank or a credit union. So in this way, we can take a total profitability picture for a given month, and we will maintain this daily. So we're taking the daily balances, calculating a parallel profitability database. We're obviously not touching the gross income statement of the bank or the credit union. That still operates in the same way. So this is a parallel profitability system, but centered around the accounts of customers and members. So one of the key things we're able to do then is to answer questions like, is it true that the bank or the credit union's profit, 80% of it is driven by 20% of your customers or members? And this is a very typical profit distribution that we see across all of our customers, that there is a high concentration of profitability in a small percentage of customers or members. And so this chart here is showing a total population of members of 33,000. And if we split it into 10% deciles, so 3,300 members in each decile, we can see that the top 10% generates considerably more profit than any of the other deciles. And given we're losing money at the bottom here, it's really only the top 30% of, in this case, customers or members that are actually generating profit. So this becomes really interesting then as you drill into those 33,000 members. What do these members have in terms of volume and in terms of accounts and services that makes them different to this next 10%, next 10%, and so on? And so you can see that distribution and the high concentration, if you like, and risk in a way in terms of relying on a concentrated set of customers or members to drive the profitability. If we take exactly the same data set and we look at that by a loan product or deposit product, we can now see which products are making money, which ones are losing money, and therefore, again, we can get a product-centric view based on obviously volume and the net interest margin minus the cost to serve those accounts. And then finally, an alternative view to branch profitability. In some banks and credit unions, when you look at the gross income statement, they may be long in those branches, long in deposits, and therefore their interest expense is higher than their interest income. So at the gross level, it looks like you're running loss-making branches once you add in operating costs to a higher interest expense. But the reality is those branches are serving the financial services needs of your customers. They're also generating liquidity, which is being used for lending. And so in the profitability module, what we're doing is giving value for those deposits. So whereas in the gross income statement, a branch might be looking like it's a loss-making branch. Under profitability, it's being given value in the profit analyzer system, and therefore can appear equally profitable to other branches that may be longer in lending. And then if we roll this profitability data up by member, obviously different banks, different credit unions have different profiles. Some are more consumer orientated or commercial. This is of a profitability looking at a membership of a credit union. And obviously one of the risks or demographic facts is it's an aging population. And so not only can we see the balance by profit or by, age range, we can also see profit by age range. So we could put this profit table next to a balance table and see, is it the 61 to 70-year-olds that have the most balances? If so, what type of products and services, what makes them more profitable than the next and the next age demographic? So again, interesting ways to analyze, look at profitability, whether it's through the lens of segmentation, product, branch, loan officer, or in this case, age demographic. So all of this in a continuous database. When I say continuous database, one of the nice things that we've done with our profitability solution, we've enabled it to run out of the box, which means we can switch it on for any of our customers without any major configuration or implementation effort on their behalf. What we're able to do is bring in all of the loan deposits with contract rates and the gross interest. So everything on the left-hand side of this loan profitability screen is what is already in your balance sheet and your income statement. And then the system that BankBI has built is the ability to, against all of those loans, assign an FTP rate, a cost of funds rate to calculate the net interest margin. And the way we've done this out of the box is we can use the running interest expense cost of funds in your balance sheet right now and your income statement, and the same on the loan side, the yield on your loan portfolio as the worth of funds. So we can base the initial calculation of internally derived FTP rates running off your own balance sheet on loans and deposits. By rolling and allocating fees, we can add that into the interest margin to get to the gross profit. And then by deducting costs of every member's account, we can then get to a net profit. All of this information is available on a daily basis because there's a sort of balance times rate for every day in the month, as well as then rolled up by month into a profit period. So in one file, you could download all of your members' accounts, get all of this profitability information just in one single file, which you could obviously look at through the application here and then analytics, but you could also put into Excel, pivot it in Excel, or push that data out of BankBI into maybe a CRM system. So if you're looking to complement information you have about your members or customers in a CRM system, one component that we could be used to supply into that process is maybe the profitability of those customers. So as you look to householding or you look to pricing decisions, you've got not just the balance history, but also the profitability and possibly ranking of the customer into different segments. So that's the profit analyzer solution. If I'm moving on now swiftly onto the planning, budgeting, and forecasting, a lot of banks and credit unions over the years we've seen kind of struggle with a pretty painful annual budget cycle. Often that involves lifting data, putting it into either Excel or other third-party products, mapping that data in. Possibly some of these Excel models have been inherited over the years and they've been it's difficult to maintain or difficult to change, or there's key person dependency. Only one person knows how to actually run the models. So we built out and released last year a planning, budgeting, and forecasting solution. So fully integrated on top of the financials, that I talked about, bringing in the balance sheet, income statement, all of the loan and deposit information. We're able to use that information to build out not just a budget, but also extend a budget into a multi-year strategic plan. And then when we get into a new financial year, we can reforecast based on the latest actuals. So maybe interest rates didn't move as we expected, or maybe volumes are not quite what we budgeted for. We can do a reforecast completely separate from the original budget, so that we can then bring that reforecast into the financial reporting in BankBI. So within a board pack, for example, you could report against not just the budget, but you could then have a reforecast with obviously explanation and reasons within that reforecast. So a little bit of a demo here in terms of how this all comes together. So in this example here, I built out a budget for 2026 using December 25's figures. And the way you do this is you navigate your balance sheet. And as you navigate the balance sheet, you'll see a series of drivers appear. And those drivers allow you to enter, in the case of loans, things like loan growth assumptions. So how are we going to grow our loans? And we could do that at a high product level, or we could go down to a branch level. So here I'm proposing a 5% growth on our fixed rate first mortgages. In other areas of the balance sheet, if we go into savings accounts, we'll see different drivers and different share growth or deposit growth that we've entered into the model. So again, navigating the model is very simple. You can put things at different levels depending on the level that you want to interact. And what that is doing is creating the growth. And obviously there's a monthly view, because ultimately, ultimately we're going to put this into a budget to put into our financial reporting, or we have this annual view. So we can flip between the balance sheet or the budget, or the income statement. We can see everything in real time. So as we make changes to any driver, both the balance sheet, income statement change in real time. So here I'm in occupancy in terms of non-interest expense. I can put in my growth at a branch department level, or I can do it at a higher level. And I put here occupancy growing by 5%. So as I go into the driver, we can see firstly the history of last year, and then we can see what we want to do this year. So in this case, I've put 6% growth over the year. I can see that growth between the history last year and what we're growing to this year. And then I can, below that, we can see the accounting and the cash flow that's generated off of this particular driver. So these drivers not only impact, for example, here, an expense account, but it would also impact cash and cash flow. Similarly on loans and deposits, they would impact loans and deposits as well. There are drivers around fixed assets for loading fixed asset schedule and depreciation. There's also a full configuration area. So as well as growth assumptions, we also need to put interest rate assumptions into the model. So we can build up product related interest assumptions, link them to base rates. If base rates don't change as we expected, we can simply come into the model, change a base rate, and in real time, we can see the impact on the budget in terms of that rate change. So in this case, higher loan rates, which means a higher interest margin. Finally, all of those drivers can be viewed through what we call the business plan. So this is the great audit trail of the budgeting process. Obviously, a lot of assumptions on loans, a lot of assumptions on deposits go into our business plan or our budget. We capture every one of those, and by putting in descriptions, effectively you get a complete audit trail of all assumptions that went into your budget. And you can download this, and that effectively can support effectively documenting how you got to the budget that you've actually created. Any of those assumptions can be switched on or off in the application, so you can see the impact and effect of those drivers just by toggling them on and off. So you get a very clear understanding of the impact both on the balance sheet and on the income statement of those drivers. So very agile solution, taking us through the planning and budgeting process. Now, one of the key decision points, if you like, in terms of implementing planning and budgeting is the level at which you want to do your cash flow modeling. So a lot of banks and credit unions are used to forecasting, in effect, their net general ledger balance movement in a budget. So in this case, moving the budget from 352 million to 355. this movement is obviously net of originations and repayments. And so the cash flow that we can infer from forecasting a GL movement is the net movement in the GL balance is effectively the cash flow, the net movement month to month. And we can generate interest receivable as an average yield on that portfolio. So in other words, we're forecasting the average yield on the portfolio as we grow the portfolio, and the net month-to-month movement is the cash flow movement. So that's one option in terms of implementing the planning and budgeting solution. The other option is to use a more granular cash flow approach, which looks at the underlying loan and deposit accounts, and on loans, for example, calculates the amortization schedule, charts that in terms of the loan decay as loans repay over time. And so what you're then doing is forecasting what is the new lending you need to originate to maintain or grow the balance. So obviously taking a more accurate approach in terms of forecasting, and therefore the cash flow is actually based off the declining balance, the principal repayment of loans with interest. So we're looking at things like principal frequency, interest frequency, and the rates on each individual loan. And then we're looking at just forecasting what, as I said, is the new origination that we need to do. So in terms of modeling this, obviously new business would be at the offer rate you expect to offer in the market in the coming year. The bottom section, if this was a fixed term loan, for example, the loan rates would already be baked into the contracts on your balance sheet, and we'd be using those loan rates. So by this loan and deposit account cash flow model, you get a slightly more accurate cash flow forecast, and you understand the declining balance. If you put into the model charge-off percentages or allowance for loan loss percentages, that will also adjust this decay balance accordingly, and again give you the ability to put those components into the planning and budgeting model. Extending a budget for multiple years is just a case of switching on more years and extending the growth forecast. So what a lot of our customers have done is built out, the 26 budget, then immediately followed that by extending it into either a 3 or 5 year budget. So this then becomes a continuous rolling agile cycle, if you like, because as we get into 26, for example, and let's say we move into budget season for 27, we can drop off 24 and 25. We can take just December 26. We can extend the horizon out to 31. And now we're building out, just reforecasting what the budget's going to be for 27. So this becomes a continuous agile reforecast. You can reforecast at any time in the financial year and then go into a new budget cycle, and effectively rolling one reforecast into becoming the basis of the new budget cycle for 2027. And a budget at the end of the day is really just taking a snapshot at a point in time. That's the point in time you present the budget for approval. That goes on the shelf. We take a copy of it, and then we roll into the same reforecast and budget cycle that I just described for the following year. So taking the budget is just a case of, as I say, a snapshot in time, getting that budget approved, and then keeping that budget on the shelf, and then independently rolling forward. So we then move into the next reforecast and budgeting cycle. So we're having a lot of success in rolling this out. At the back end of last year, we took about half a dozen of our clients through, as I said, their 26 budget process. One of those credit unions was SRP Federal Credit Union down in the Carolina, Georgia border around Augusta. SRP is around about a $2 billion credit union, and they went through the budget cycle at the back end of last year for their 26 budget. Full case study on our website. We also have a number of referenceable clients should anybody wish to speak to any. So that's the planning and budgeting. So hopefully we are now moving swiftly on to how do we leverage AI? How can we use AI on top of all of the components that I've just talked about? So getting that single version of the truth, having the deterministic KPI ratios, having a new user interface to build the reporting, having those additional tools around profitability and planning and budgeting really now allow us to start using those results in an AI strategy. So the final step, if you like, is to deploy what we are thinking of as an AI co-pilot for reporting and analysis. So we are going to use AI to be that finance assistant that can provide first draft professional level commentary on results by looking at detecting sort of significant financial deviations, can surface specific revenue or cost drivers through AI to keep insights, aligned with expectation. So what this means is that we are looking to, in phase one, create a conversational interface between all of the results that I just talked about and the AI large language model that we're using. And so this allows users to, in effect, query results through a natural language conversation with the AI model. So that will not only create a summary of results or analysis, but it will also help navigate you to specific reports that show you the results. So rather than find those reports within all the menu structure, by having a natural language conversation with a AI interface, that will be able to not only show you the results, navigate you to the appropriate reports and summarize what you're seeing there. Phase two of that is then to extend that use to things like board commentary. So where we are pulling together a board report, BankBI will calculate all of the financials, we'll roll that into a board report. But what we can then do is pass those financial results into the large language model to get it to summarize the first draft of narrative. That could be around board reporting, it could be around ALCO reporting, and it's going to give you that first draft narrative, summarization, highlighting exceptions. You could interrogate, ask, well, what could I do about it? It might come up with suggestions. Everything at the end of the day requires you as financial professionals to be ultimately in control. So we see AI as providing useful analytics and analysis, but there always has to be a human in the loop, but not just in the loop, but on top of the loop as well. So key is really that we're not going to ask AI to calculate. We're going to use it as that sort of premium intelligence layer for executive reporting. Once we've done board reporting, we could expose the profitability analysis data. We could also expose budget data and forecast data. And this will allow us then to make sure that we have a controlled AI approach where BankBI is doing the deterministic querying. Everything is 100% traceable. We have full audit trail, and we have that's governed by a full what we call KPI ontology, which is a fancy way of saying that the format and structure of the ratios is well known, documented, and auditable from a internal, external, and regulatory perspective. So that allows us then to really think of that co-pilot as helping us become more efficient, more effective around executive reporting, around profitability analysis, spotting trends that we may not have noticed or understood, being able to also look at budget scenarios, and maybe even do what-if scenarios around helping produce budgets in the first place. So again, coming up with suggestions as to the way certain results could be achieved through maybe a conservative or an aggressive budget structure. So rolling AI really is about having that conversational analysis, being able to ask specific questions, being able then to extend that into board commentary, but always having, as I said, the human in the loop. It'll be up to you to accept or not. It'll be even up to you to whether you want to use this or not. I could well see a future where not everybody's keen to switch on AI over their results. And so this will not be something that slips under the covers, as it were. It will be something you opt into or you opt out of. But we do see it in a very controlled, as I say, with the guardrails providing the automation. And coupled with that is the proactive insight detection. So what I mean by that is we could use the tool to help us detect things. So not just react to things we're asking, but also point out unusual expense movements or where we are close to breaching certain limits or thresholds that we've set within the system. So that is our roadmap. We are building this now. We're building the first conversational financial piece. We anticipate having something to show on this later this year. And this will obviously be on the back of version 7 and the migration of our customers to version 7. So just a reminder then of the value proposition. 7 allows us to close the month faster, improve board reporting, gain efficiencies around not having to wait for results to compute. The loan and deposit analysis will equally be as fast and efficient, more user capability to define and build reports. And then around profitability, that ability to analyze profitability on a continuous basis across branch, product, and member. And then finally, the planning, budgeting, and forecasting, being into a more agile forecast, a more efficient process, being able to then roll continuously from forecast to budget into multi-year strategic reporting cycle. I covered a lot. I went pretty fast, and apologies, I'm just running over the time here. Just to finalize, we are BankBI. We've been running now for 13 years. We have 90 customers in 42 countries. We've recently expanded into Australia, into Ireland, and we are working with banks and credit unions throughout Canada, United States, the Caribbean, and across the world. So thank you very much for your time today. I hope you found it useful. If you posted a question, I will look at the questions and get back to you. This recording will be available to you and your colleagues, so please feel free to share the recording with any of your colleagues who weren't able to make it today. And thank you again for joining today's webinar, and I wish you a good day.